Coming up next, a woman is scheduled for execution tonight for the first time in over 70 years.
That's what's generating, I think, a lot of the interest.
One UGA student jumped into the boxing ring to try to save a boy battling a life-threatening illness.
His fight just keeps on going.
The #1 college basketball team in the country is traveling to Athens, and UGA has plans to upset their season.
How do we get ready for Kentucky and I'll call the blood over there to the scrimmage at Hawks tomorrow?
This is Northeast Georgia's only local source for TV news. From the Grady Georgia, this is Grady Newsource.
Welcome to Grady Newsource. I'm Sierra Grady.
And I'm Kimberly Johnson.
Today's top story is a local group holding a vigil tonight to protest the state execution of a woman. This execution has generated a lot of controversy for one main reason: she's a woman. But Grady Newsource reporter Brian Garcia talked with protesters and activists who say there are actually more reasons.
That's right. Those people say many things have changed since the woman was first sentenced to death. That's why they're gathering here at UGA's Arches in a little over an hour to air out those differences and protests. But the protests will also serve as a vigil for the woman.
But the fact that she is a woman that's right. That's what's generating, I think, a lot of the interest. And the fact that, like we talked about, she didn't actually pull the trigger. It was a murder for hire.
Kelly Renee Gissendiner was given the death penalty for having her lover murder her husband. The fact she didn't actually pull the trigger has many people rallying behind her to save her life. On Twitter, people are supporting her using the hashtag #KellyOnMyMind. Supporters say another reason she has received so much support is because the petition says she has turned her life around. The petition says she has been a pastoral presence to many, teaching, preaching, and living a life of purpose. Kelly is a living testament to the possibility of change and the power of hope. She is an extraordinary example of the rehabilitation that the correction system aims to produce. Traction isn't just picking up on Twitter, but also through an online petition. By 9 a.m., the petition had 47,000 signatures. By 4 p.m., it had grown to 65,000. Sociology professor Todd Krohn says part of the reason is what he calls the chivalry hypothesis.
Sometimes women are, when they're in the criminal justice system, are treated less harshly than men, because the feeling is that the prosecution and the police and so on are usually male, and they want to sort of protect the women.
Chivalry did not play out in this case, as the lover pled guilty and got a life sentence with possibility of parole after 25 years. As for the woman, she didn't plead guilty, and she got the death sentence. Live from UGA Arch, I'm Brian Garcia, Grady Newsource.
The execution is scheduled for 7 p.m. tonight. We'll have updates for you on the Grady Newsource website.
We have some late-breaking news. Along with the protest against Gissendiner's execution, there was a protest in Atlanta in favor of expanding Medicaid. 3 Athens residents, along with 9 others, were taken into custody after participating in a sit-in on the Capitol's South Steps.
The 3 are members of the organization Athens for Everyone. Former mayoral candidate Tim Denson, UGA student Adam Veal, and board member of Athens for Everyone Adam Lasila are currently being held in custody.
1 in 3 teenagers, 1 in 4 women, and 1 in 6 men will find themselves in an abusive relationship at some point in their lives. That's according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. It's a simple yet powerful fact, and yes, you heard it correctly. That's why one nonprofit in Winder is dedicated to making the number a little less shocking. Reporter Sophie Arch has been looking into the number of women and children a local shelter is helping escape from their abusers. Sophie, how many women are served each year?
Hundreds of survivors get help from Peace Place every year. And over the weekend, they host their 15th annual Domestic Abuse Survivors Ball, where I talked to the executive director who wants to make one thing very clear. Domestic abuse does not discriminate, and anyone can be affected.
That wouldn't be one of my friends, and it absolutely could be. It absolutely could be right now that somebody you know is in an abusive relationship.
The 14th annual Peace Place Ball was full of stars, but not the kind you would expect. These stars show true and shocking facts about domestic abuse. Georgia is ranked the 9th highest state for women killed at the hands of their male abuser. And every 9 seconds, a woman in the U.S. is beaten or assaulted. That's why supporters say shelters like the Peace Place are becoming more and more necessary in Georgia.
Helping them not feel guilty about staying, but being proud of themselves for leaving.
It's a lesson that Sherry had to learn the hard way. She escaped with her son from her husband of 13 years when her son told her enough was enough.
Been married 13 years, same person, but, after a while, just used to
Children can also be seriously affected by domestic violence. This video was made by Peace Place for a mother who moved to the shelter with her children. They described their first night without violence.
I was sort of scared when I walked in there, and I was happy that there was going to be no more violence.
I remember coming in a room and having a place where there's no violence and stuff.
Shelters like Peace Place try day by day to not only end the fear, but also to end domestic violence.
Every shelter in this state is saving lives and making people's lives better.
The ball was incredibly emotional for everyone involved, and I'm not sure if you could tell from the video, but there weren't many dry eyes in the room by the time the night ended. Live in the newsroom, Sophie Archer, Grady Newsource.
Thank you, Sophie. More than 1,800 women and children have been sheltered by Peace Place since it opened in 2000.
One officer says he is seeing fights in downtown Athens more and more often, and other officers are becoming the victims. Reporter Kevney Woodside spoke to a student who says he saw a policeman get attacked with his own eyes. Kevney, what happened that night?
Sierra, the student's name is Jonathan Chong. He says he was downtown with his friends when he saw a fellow student punch an officer directly in the face. Now, assaulting a police officer is a felony, but that's not stopping some people from attacking them. Jonathan Chong is dropping these people off downtown, a place he says is dangerous.
There's a few frat guys that like carrying knives.
Earlier this month, Chong went downtown with his friends. He quickly found himself watching a fight on the sidewalk.
The guy punched the cop, and the cop tackled him down. We just see a crowd of people, and then one guy swung a punch, and then out of nowhere, a cop just comes over and tackles him. That was an interesting night. That was actually my 21st birthday.
Jody Thompson is a senior police officer with Athens, Clark County. He says attacks against police are actually pretty common. We are assaulted often, and the FBI statistics will prove that. Students can also find themselves in the crossfire, at least in the case of Javade Chapman. Chapman went to a bar named Whiskey Bent to celebrate his 21st birthday last Saturday. Him and a friend ended up being attacked by 6 people he has never met. In the struggle, Chapman struck a cop. Chong says he blames the violence downtown on alcohol.
What can you expect when it's a place full of drunk people?
Now, if you look to my right, you'll see I'm actually standing in front of Whiskey Bent where the attack actually happened. And as of today, Chapman is being prosecuted for felony obstruction by a police officer. And that's because when he got off the ground at Whiskey Bent, he immediately punched an officer in the face also. His girlfriend insists that Chapman was just confused and thought the officer was one of his attackers. Live from Whiskey Bent, I'm Kevney Woodside, Grady Newsource.
Chapman and his girlfriend plan to speak with a public defender in the coming days. They are hopeful that they will have a strong case. When we return, find out why some people are fighting for charity.
One man's possible insurance fraud could lead to higher premiums for you. A federal grand jury is now considering charges against an Oconee County man. Insurance companies say fraud cases like this are pushing up rates for everyone. Grady Newsource reporter Kendall Trammell shows how this kind of fraud works. Kendall, if people aren't committing the fraud, why do they still have to pay the price?
Because, Kimberly, companies have to make their money one way or the other. The National Insurance Crime Bureau says insurance fraud costs Americans billions of dollars each year. A group that analyzes the data says insurers estimate that there is some type of fraud in 15% of all claims. An investigator from the Oconee County Sheriff's Office told a grand jury about a man in their county who is part of that 15%. When a grand jury is reviewing evidence, information like the man's name is not made public. But whether or not the jury charges him, there's money the insurance company is still missing.
Whenever you have insurance fraud, it drives up insurance prices.
Just ask your insurance agent. We did. Steve Denman's State Farm office says about 12 to 18% of insurance premiums are built in to cover the cost of insurance fraud. And there are more fees that have to be paid even after a case.
Even if the insurance company wins, they have to pay legal counsel, which is incredibly expensive. And this case has been ongoing for 5 years. So you can imagine how much time has been billed out by the law firm just trying to contest the charges.
Cases like these don't come up often, but when they do, it's something other insurance holders have to take responsibility for. The best thing you can do is to be honest with your insurance claims. I'm Kendall Chamel, Grady Newsource.
Thank you, Kendall. Insurance companies say you should call the National Insurance Crime Bureau at the number listed at the bottom of your screen if you suspect any type of activity that could involve insurance fraud.
UGA's Equal Opportunity Office is hosting a talk tonight about sexual consent. The event is called Open Dialogue on Sexual Consent. Reporter Aaron Jones says the group wants people to understand what no means.
College students really need to know what it really means to have sexual consent. Janice Dawkins says sexual consent means that there is a mutual agreement.
Words or actions that are knowingly, freely, and actively given, indicating permission to engage in a mutually agreed upon sexual activity.
Welch Suggs says sexual assault often only gets media coverage if it involves an athlete.
So people who would not necessarily care about or be focused on a sexual assault, even though it's a very serious issue, there are many more people who are more interested in how it's going to affect their team.
UGA officials hope their seminar will raise awareness about what sexual consent really means. Aaron Jones, Grady Newsource.
Several fights broke out at Hedges Bar in downtown Athens this weekend, but it was all for charity. The Bulldog Brawl is a charity boxing event where players fight over money for their cause. Reporter Macy Lauren caught up with one of the fighters who jumped into the ring for a special boy battling a life-threatening illness.
The gear is on, the gloves are out, and Ben Mazingo is getting in the ring for his first official boxing match. But it's not just about the sport for Ben. He has something to fight for.
I've always wanted to throw myself in a ring and to see how I can hold my own. And then I realized it was a philanthropy event, and I thought that was even cooler of an experience.
The reason why Ben's gearing up and ready to have punches thrown at him is a little boy named Nathan Farrell. He's 7 years old and has mitochondrial disease. It affects his development and body functions. Nathan is a Children's Miracle Network patient in Florida, a family friend who Ben has known since he was first diagnosed as a baby.
And a kid like that, you would think would quit at some point. And it doesn't seem like he's slowing down in any way.
Taking a cue from Nathan, Ben was no quitter at the brawl. After 3 tough rounds of jabs, hooks, and uppercuts, Ben just couldn't come out on top against a veteran brawler in his bout. But coming in second means he still won 30% of the fight's donation pot. That's a couple $100 for Nathan. Ben says bringing awareness to his cause made him a winner that night.
My fight is going to end Saturday, win or lose. But his fight just keeps on going.
Ben says every punch he took was nothing compared to what Nathan battles each day. Nathan is the real fighter. In Athens, Macy Lauren, Grady Newsource.
And now, sports.
I'm sports reporter Charlotte Hall. The undefeated Kentucky Wildcats basketball team is on the road to Athens right now as I speak. Nobody needs to tell you that Kentucky is the #1 team in the country. But Georgia has plans to be the first team to upset them. Today, the UGA team talked about what they have to do in order to win the game.
We played Kentucky there. We're a different team 1 month later than we were in that game. They're a different team 1 month later. We played fairly well up in Lexington, but we're going to have to play the game a little different, and we're going to have to play the game a lot better to give ourselves a chance to win. They've got such a great team.
Georgia has posted the best odds of any other team to beat Kentucky in the nationally televised event. The Wildcats are favored to beat the Bulldogs on Tuesday night, but after an impressive showing this past weekend, Georgia may give them a run for their money. Georgia topped the Missouri Tigers 68-44 in Saturday's showing. A big win like this one looks good for Georgia going into tomorrow's game. Georgia pounced early on the Tigers. Missouri was able to get some points on the board in the second half because of a defensive lag by the Bulldogs. Georgia rebounded at the end of the game, though, to pull off a 24-point win. The team's focus is now on the undefeated Kentucky Wildcats.
Sure, Kentucky's got a great team. One of the great teams of all time. They got a front line bigger than I think every NBA team, but maybe one. You know, so how do we get ready for Kentucky? And I'll call Bud over there, see if we can scrimmage the Hawks tomorrow. You know, they got a great team. They really do.
The last time the team beat Kentucky was 2 years ago. This weekend was huge for the #2 Georgia women's tennis team. The team is one of the youngest in the SEC Conference. 5 of the team's 9 players are freshmen, but that did not stop them from contributing to the team's 2-0 sweep of LSU and Texas A&M this weekend. The Bulldogs battled in doubles play. It came down to a tiebreak on court 3, which was eventually won by the Texas A&M Aggies. In singles, the team fought back to make the overall score 3-2 before freshman Kennedy Schaefer clinched the match at 4-2.
It's not too different from juniors. I mean, the only difference now is that I get to do it for a more important cause, which is my team. So it's just really rewarding knowing that I can help contribute to us and our victories and kind of try and leave a legacy behind for this year for Georgia and then as years come.
The team will head to Alabama this weekend to take on the Crimson Tide and the Auburn Tigers. The Clark Central women's soccer team is 3-0 for the first time since 2007. Tonight, the team has a chance to go up 4-0 against top region opponent Loganville. Head coach Chris Hulse was up early this morning preparing for this evening's game, looking over highlights from Friday's win and preparing his roster for the big game. But win or lose, the team will be back at practice tomorrow for preparation for their home game Friday. Hulse says the success this season is purely on the team's hard work this offseason.
They haven't started 3-0 as far back as the records go. So it would just be another step into showing them, hey, you did the work, you earned this, this is a result of what you've done.
As for tonight, Hulse believes in his team's chances. He said if his team plays how they've been playing, that they will shock some people tonight.
And now, the weather.
We had a brief warm-up today, a nice change from the cloud cover we had this weekend. Cool and rainy tomorrow, though, again. Warming up by Wednesday, though, and it is shaping up to be a good weekend in the forecast. Now, service map for today and tomorrow. This high pressure is going to be moving off to the northeast, and that is going to set up a wedge event here in northeast Georgia, bringing us cooler temperatures and rainy conditions. Now, low temperatures tonight going to be in the mid to lower 40s for a lot of us. Hot spot of 49 in Atlanta tonight, and high temperatures tomorrow. You can really see how that wedge is going to be affecting our high temperatures, staying in the upper 40s. But south of I-20, they could get into the 70s tomorrow, so we are going to have quite the temperature gradient. Now tonight, low around 47, spotty showers after midnight. Tomorrow, keeping the showers and cloud cover with high only around 49. Day planner really emphasizing that, keeping the cloud cover throughout the day and little fluctuations in the temperatures. 5-day forecast for you, 73 for your Wednesday and cooling off into the 50s for the weekend. I'm student meteorologist Riley Hale with your Northeast Georgia weather.
The Athens Solid Waste Department is trying to change how you see old bananas and apple cores. The department is teaching a class to help people learn how to compost. Reporter Reid Brown shows us how the students are becoming master composters.
The power saws are out, and hammers are busily pounding nails. The goal of all this hard work is to learn how to compost. More than 30 people are taking part in this class to learn how to decrease waste. Some of these students, like Lauren Zeichner, have been interested in composting before.
I have not been very successful in composting in the past, and I said, let us crack this nut. Let us figure out what it needs.
The group's main project is constructing a compost bin. The bin's design allows anyone to compost in their own yards.
The compost bin is designed so that you can take pieces of wood like this and place them onto the front.
The group learned how to build the bins from Chris McDowell. He says it's fun to show people how to become composters.
I think generally the group that we had a good time, and so, you know, the key of teaching it is just making sure that people, they stay busy, but at the same time they're having fun doing what they're doing.
The group also got to see a bin in action. David Harshkett took the composting class a couple years ago.
We talk about one bin, well, why build one when you can build 6?
And he's more than happy to help others.
Helps them to say, look, this is what you can do with what you've learned, and otherwise it's all theoretical, you know. So, yeah, I don't mind showing anybody anything.
It's been a long day for the class, but they are leaving with the knowledge of turning garbage into gold. Wade Barron, Grady Newsource.
The composting class will end on April 1st. All the graduates are required to perform 40 hours of community service to teach others about composting.
From all of us here at Grady Newsource, thanks for joining us. We'll be back here tomorrow at 5.
But until then, be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram and like our Facebook page. Good night.
Grady Newsource is a student production of the Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Georgia, which is solely responsible for its contents. Views expressed do not represent those of the administration nor the Board of Regents at the University System of Georgia.